And welcome to this week's episode. For our returning listeners, we are always so happy to have you back. And for the new people, welcome. We always take you on an interesting adventure of shifting energy, understanding what's going on in the world. And I always like to bring in people that I love and trust to be able to share with you, so you can always have a learning experience. I know a lot of people have asked me, when is the call-in show coming back? It is coming back. April 27th. So we've had a bunch of guests in the last little while, because there's been so much shifting and transitioning. And I know with the new moon and a lot of people saying, what is going on? You got to really trust right now. There is a lot of truth coming out. If you heard me with Lucas Mack last week, we were talking about truth in mainstream media. It is coming out a lot right now. So this is really good. You got to stay focused. But one of the things we are always talking about on this show is understanding how you can connect to your body, how you can be more aware, how you can shift through. And we know right now, the interesting times going on, your body's feeling it. And one of the things that people always ask me, and you've heard me talk about this if you've been in my community, is who are some of the people that take care of me? So when I'm working with so many of you, it's really important that I also have care. And one of the things that I love and have talked a lot about in my community is osteopathic medicine. So today I am extremely happy because we have my personal care practitioner and osteopathic doctor, Dr. Robert, with us. You know, I just realized I always call you Dr. Robert. I never call you by your last name.
I always have to correct people. Technically in Canada, we're not considered doctors, but you're always welcome to call me Robert. I'm never that pretentious.
I guess in osteopathic medicine, that's true. I just call you that. So, okay, we did good for correcting. I'm so happy you're able to join. Now, I know you are in Oakville, Canada. You're in the GTA. But for everybody listening and who's going to listen to this later, I really want you to pay attention to what Robert's saying, because it's really important, no matter where you are, that we'll also talk about, you know, things that maybe other people could look for in their area, if they're looking for osteopathic care. So if that's okay.
Absolutely.
We'll get into that. So one of the things I love about what you do and osteopath is that what I really realize is, you know, dealing with the body, dealing with the energy, dealing with the emotions, and that's a lot of what you do. You realize how the body is so connected and the emotions that get trapped. And I think right now, you and I've had many conversations on how a lot of emotions are coming out of the body right now, is shifting. So we could probably talk for 2 hours. So I'm like, okay, we have 1 hour. We're not taking a break today, guys. We're not taking calls because we want to be able to get as much of this information in. So what do you, I guess, what drew you to being an osteopath? I'd love to know that perception for the audience listening as well.
Well, this gets really interesting. I've always looked for more permanent solutions. When I was young, I had a myriad of health problems, and I really was just getting sick and tired of people taking my money and offering me absolutely no solution, but placating my health condition. And so I really just kept looking, but osteopathy really kind of fell into my lap. I would actually say that osteopathy chose me rather than I chose osteopathy. It was really a really unique sequence of events that led me to osteopathy, but from here on in, I had no choice. There was no other solution for me. It offered the best results and the most holistic view that fit my model.
I like that you say that. And, you know, a lot of people think that this kind of work has only been around for like a couple of years. The biggest myth, can you maybe shed some light, one, how long it's really been around and why it seems to be so many people, well, a lot of people don't know about it. Yep. And because a lot of times when I bring it up, they go, what, an osteopath? Like, what is that? You know, and it's I think we have to debunk that. If, yeah,
Absolutely. I tell everybody, I think we're one of the most well-kept secrets
you are.
that everybody, if you ask around, many people know of osteopaths, but very few people hear about us. We don't advertise. That's a very common thing in osteopathy. We just don't advertise. Probably because a lot of us are busy and advertising would just inundate us. So we kind of stay quiet. But it's been around since mid 1890s. So we're looking at over a century, going to close to a century and a half of being around. I mean, some of the popular therapies, chiropractic, in theory, we started before chiropractic did. And people don't realize that AT still actually, and it is a contention, but it is recorded, taught Palmer, the originator of chiropractic, he taught him first. So
Wow.
it was an interesting history. We just don't advertise the same.
You
So
know, and I guess it's a love-hate thing. I'm glad you don't, because I get to come see you. You're so busy. I'm like, oh. But it is one of those things that I have found over the years that it's because you look at the body as a whole. You're not just coming in and sitting down and saying, okay, I have a bump, I have a sore elbow. And you're not looking at the elbow and go, okay, let's move it. I have a sore elbow. You're looking at like you're feeling the energy. You're talking to the system. Can you explain a little more of that for people that don't understand that? Because
absolutely.
I think it needs
Um,
to be addressed.
for sure. Because I think in North America, at least, we have this idea that we look at parts and we like to address somebody by their disorder. We like to address somebody by the part that's dysfunctional. And I think that's a really skewed ideology. I think it has a place, but I don't think it should be used as much as it is. In osteopathy, at least from the origins of osteopathy, it's always looked at the person. What's really interesting is that the gentleman A.T. Still, who created it, he was the son of a pastor, and he was actually deeply religious. And its origins in osteopathy start from there and move forward. And so, really, I think you can see a cleave in most therapies where you get the people who truly understand the holistic approach, and then there's somebody who wants to put routine to it. So I'm not going to say all osteopaths are like this,
Mhm.
but on the whole, we tend to believe that we address the person. And I'd say a large percentage of osteopaths like to see you as a person. From when I was in school, they would always tell you to address the person. My teacher was synonymous for saying this. He would always say, you know, a lot of therapies address headaches. And he goes, I've never once addressed a headache. He always would say, I always address people. And
Wow.
it was something that sticks with you is that I don't treat elbow problems. I don't treat back problems. I treat people. And I think when you start to walk into a room and you approach somebody as a whole, it really makes a huge difference.
Yeah, and it's so true. And that's why when people understand energy work, I always recommend they go and find, good osteopath, because it does go so well together, right? They're looking at their emotions, they're moving and you're treating the whole body. And one of the things that I love about what you do, that I've been an advocate for forever, because that was my problem for 32 years in the medical system, is it was treated as, oh, let's look at your shoulder, let's look at the head, let's look at. Meanwhile, I had all this emotional garbage going on, and that was the root, right? So when you start to move it and shift it, and then I think people, they also, the benefit of what you do is after you leave, there is a lot of different emotional release. There is a lot of different things that come up, and I still get aha moments even after we work. It's like, oh, let's just clean out that big sewer in the dream, like things that come together that if people would look at the body as a whole, don't you, like, I think we would have a much healthier, happier society.
I would agree with that. And I think that idea of seeing your integration is something that I think every field could benefit from, whether in economics, or business or the environment or whatever part of the world you're in, we need to start seeing people and the connections of people. Basically, what we're saying is I think we've really created a society where spirituality has become devoid from everything. And it shouldn't. It should actually be the other way. Our spirituality should be invested in everything we do.
It's so true, especially now with the times we're going through. I always say, work on yourself, work on yourself. It has to be number one to get through all of this transition. And you really need to look at your body as that complete whole. One of the questions that people ask me, and I didn't know this, it's a new question, maybe you can address it. Somebody in the community recently brought up, oh, there's different kinds of osteopath work. Can you address that for people? Because I actually, I just like what I have. I didn't know there was different kinds. I'm like, okay, can we address that? What is that?
This is, that's, there are many ways they can approach this. The clearest distinction is like doctor of osteopath and manual practitioner.
Okay.
That's the biggest distinction. I'll go to the second division after that.
Oh, there we are. A little bit of a freeze. Happens, guys, when we're live. It's coming back. You want to make sure that you understand your body and the way it shifts. So we'll just make sure that we can bring him back. And I'll tell you, with the osteopath work, I know that I really like it. A lot of people ask me all the time. And the reason I love it is because it goes very well with the energy work that I've shifted. And so it's really, really important. So, there we go. We brought you back because we froze there for a bit. So it's just filling.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
It's okay. So we got to bring you back to the difference.
Oh, absolutely. I'm hoping it's not my connection. I wired it in and everything, but
it happens. Internet everywhere is crazy right now. It is backlogged. I could tell you all sorts of stories. So no apologies. We just go off until you come back.
Excellent. So back to the division between doctor of osteopathy and manual practitioner is that doctor of osteopathy is usually found in Britain, America, I forget where else, but they basically are doctors with a specialty in osteopathy. Okay. And so they can do all the functions of an osteopath, but they have a tendency to be able to lean towards osteopathic care first. In Canada, in other parts of the world, we're not entitled to that title. That's a whole separate discussion as to why in Canada, we're solely manual practitioners. Doctors are separate from osteopathic practitioners. And so in Canada, we specialize. Now, that's usually to our advantage. From the doctors of osteopathy that I've seen in the United States, they often praise us because our hands-on are way better. Because that's all we do. We tend to be very good with manual skills, whereas they kind of divide it in the United States. I'm not going to say they're diminished, but they don't have the opportunity we do because we only have that. So there's the major distinction between doctor of osteopathy and manual practitioner, osteopathic manual practitioner. There's also a subdivision. And then you get the practitioners who follow more of a manual model of osteopathy. And then and we like to call ourselves the classical oriented osteopaths. Classically oriented follow the original ideologies of Andrew Taylor Still, who created it. And that tends to be the philosophy that tends to be more holistic. I've had a lot of discussions, and this goes into a very interesting diversion. I've talked to my colleagues who really, we've gone to length to discuss this, the philosophy. And we have decided that there is actually only one osteopathy. There's no division, there's your expression of it, but there is only one. And so we have to start to respect other osteopaths for their lens of what they do. And maybe there's an osteopath out there who only deals with knees, and that's his gateway to the health of the body. And if that's what he chooses to say is his gateway, I have to honor that. Yeah. And although I choose to listen to somebody and their emotional well-being, I choose to see how you express your emotions in your body. I choose to see how it manifests or communicates through the disease state. That's my lens. And that's a whole separate discussion, because I often tell people there's no wrong that although you might not prefer acupuncture or chiropractic or osteopathy, that's your choice. But it's kind of like tools in a toolbox. Every therapy is a tool in a toolbox. And you might not want to repair your pane glass window with a hammer. You might not want to screw in your bolt with a saw. It doesn't mean that the saw is wrong or the bolt is wrong. It just means the pairing isn't correct. And so we often see this. So I often have to tell people, when you choose your osteopath or your healthcare practitioner, you just have to understand what you need and what they're offering, and be very respectful of where they're coming from.
Yeah, I really do like that. And it's really important people use their intuition. And like, I know I always listen to my body, and I know lots of people who love acupuncture. My body, not so much. I'm not saying I don't know. I would not, I'm not saying I never recommend it to people, or if they say, I say, go if you feel like it. I just know enough with my body that it goes, yeah, not so much. I've tried a few times. It's like, yeah, not so much. So, and there's great ones out there. It's just, you got to listen, like you said, and make sure you're a fit and that it functions. And I'm really happy that you said that, because when people are listening, then they could say, well, what is that right person for me? One of the things, that I hear sometimes with people when they try and they go, okay, I've gone to an osteopath, they find it different because it is a very gentle touch. It's not like you're sitting there, like a massage therapist, gets in there and they're like really pushing hard and you're like, I can't get off the table. It is actually, I'm not saying there's not moments where you go, okay, it might hurt a little bit, but it's such a gentle process. And this sometimes confuses people. Like, how could you be moving something in the body with such a gentle process?
Yeah, that's a really good question. A really good point you're bringing up, because I think the difference is the ideology we see in North America is, you're broken, I have to fix you. Mm-hmm. And that's the case of, you're not in the right position, I will force you into that position. And in osteopathy, and it's one of our principles, that we believe the body is self-healing, self-regulating, and self-maintaining. And what that really speaks to is the idea that you have all the faculties to repair yourself. I'm only assisting you. And I often say this, and it often shocks new patients. I'm like, I'm not here to fix you. I'm not going to fix your knee or your gastric problems. I will assist you to fix yourself. And that's a whole different ideology. That's so much more empowering than me saying, okay, well, every time your back goes out, I have to help you. To me, that's very disempowering.
That's so true. Very diminishing. And this is what I love about what you do and what I do, is because we're empowering people to listen to their body. And what we haven't taught anyone from really small, we don't learn it, is exactly what you just said. The body can repair. I would say this, restore. My things are repair, restore, and regenerate. I constantly am saying this. It knows how to do it. Sometimes it just needs a little help, a little assistance. But we're such powerful beings. People, I always say, forget our one body can power guys like a whole city, but we haven't learned to do that yet, because we're still have these belief systems, But it's
so well said. Yep.
It's true what you say, because, and I love that that's the approach. It's one of the things I love so much about your approach, because we're just working together, that 2 or more come together, then we can, whatever, I forget what it is now, expand or grow, or, we've got so much power. And I don't think we're meant to do it alone. And that's why I always love it. Like when we have a session and I'm coming for care, because I need care too. And I like care, sure, I could probably, there's a lot of things I can do on my own, but I like care. I believe as communities, as societies, we're here to help each other and empower each other.
Absolutely. Back to your point, because I don't know if I answered it directly yet, was the idea that it's gentle. And it should be, for the most part, gentle, because what we're actually doing, and I think if you look at what's actually being done, is the body's got this healing mechanism, but it just seems not to notice something. And so what we're doing is we're just creating awareness. And sometimes awareness is painful, but for the most part, it's not. Yeah. And you're just allowing the body to understand what it's doing. And that's A.T. Still said it. Brilliant man for his time. He was brilliant. And the disease state occurs when we lose integration. When something is taken out of the fold and it's isolated, that's when we get the disease state. And that can occur through many things. And the fastest way is through lack of circulation of blood or neurological supply. But There's other mechanisms, but regardless, the body doesn't hear part of itself.
Mhm.
And my job is to gently bring you to understand, hey, this is here. You need to bring it back so that you can reintegrate it. And once that happens, the amount of vitality that comes forward is incredible.
It
And
is.
it's usually pretty quick. Because my patients are often shocked. And I don't say this as a whole because I have some patients that take their time,
Yeah.
but it's so much faster than conventional therapies where they're trying to correct you to the norm. And that's
Yeah,
all.
like what you say, it's like a, okay, I'm going to push this back in, or everything is isolated. It's one of the things that I found really frustrating, growing up as a very sick child, and I'm sure you did as well, was everything is just isolated. But I'm like, okay, but if we have all the parts, your heart's having a chat with everything. I always call it your heart tribe, but I'm
Oh,
like, all
yeah.
right, everybody's friends. They're your body's like a community, right? They're all friends. So
Exactly.
if something gets taken out, like I've seen it on an energetic level, I'd be curious to hear on your perspective is like, if somebody has an organ taken out, I actually energetically see a lot of sadness in the body. Like the body goes through this like full on as if somebody just died in your family that you love so much and you can't get over that grief. Like we've never had this conversation, but I see it
Nope.
energetically. What do you see as an osteopath?
It's ironic because, and this is kind of funny because no matter who I talk to, if we're talking on the same thing, we often see the same things. And
Yeah.
if I were to, I would absolutely agree with you. It's a grief.
Yeah.
And I think one of the parts that I constantly try to do is get the body to realize it can function without the part. That's all I'm doing is just re-educating, confirming, and consoling the body. It's much easier when it's a limb as opposed to an organ. An organ, at least in my opinion, I believe the
Yeah.
organs are the harbor or the harvester of the emotion. They're the expression of the emotion. The emotional field gets created, it's harvested in the organ, and the organ creates a response to that emotional field. And the limbs are the further expression of it. And so if I were to put an analogy of a tree, the organ is more like, I hate to do this because the whole tree is beautiful, but the roots are more like the organ and the branches of the twigs are
True,
more
true.
like the
Without
limb.
the roots pulling all, the good nutrients up, then that tree isn't going anywhere.
And
So
it goes both ways,
yeah,
meaning that the twigs and the trees and the leaves feed the roots also, but they're more foundational. The roots are more the foundation to which everything extends. So I don't want to diminish either side, but definitely say that we see this interchange that occurs differently when you have a limb that's different than the organ. I get people who come in and they get like the very most common thing I see is small intestine or large intestine resectioning. Um, it's really hard to work with. I wish I could tell people what happens when you resection a small intestine. It's
I can
grievous
imagine.
is the word I want to use. It's grievous. It's just for whatever reason their karma allowed them to come to the point where they had to have that resection, but it's so grievous. The small intestine is so pivotal. It's just, and to reintegrate it, to get the body. And I tell people it's like a dance.
Yeah.
Every part dances and harmonizes. It's like a big ballroom where everybody's dancing. And then you take out all the young people, you take out all the old people, or you take out something, and all of a sudden the dance is very different. And you might have to spend the rest of your life reintegrating and learning how to dance through the parts of your body. And it's very interesting.
And it's really true. And I think, I'd be curious with this last year and, in the high levels of stress. And, we know that with high levels of stress on the body, you must see a lot of just disconnection because bodies right now are being over medicated,
Yep.
too much alcohol, too much sugar. Like in this last year, and people are, oh great, I gained 40 pounds. I'm like, oh my God, guys, like all the sugar, the alcohol, the drugs, the smoking, like it's gone through the roof. And those are things that you must see those organs just crying, like just help, because and with all the medicine that people are putting in their body and the stress. I'm curious, what do you see with most of your clients over this last year?
Yeah, wow, these are huge things you're bringing up, which
They're
is
big,
awesome.
but I want people to know because
Absolutely.
gonna get more
Um,
tense. This is I say the year where people go, oh my God. You know, if you ever had anyone on you where they're like, oh my God, I cheated, they cheated on me. And some go back and some live in hell and some don't even, they put their head in the sand. Well, this is the year where they realize all these systems were cheating on them. And now the next couple of years, they got to find out, oh no, what am I going to do? Am I going to wake up, put my head in the sand? So that's why I'm curious, because this is just getting going. And I want to hear what you're seeing so people can hear it and go, wait a minute, I got to take better care of myself.
it's really interesting. You should put it in that analogy. Is that I think people have had to devote their energy to one part. The last few centuries, we've just been devoted to one thing, and now we have to harmonize, and we have to bring all this stuff together, and it's not easy. And one of the biggest things I saw.
Oh, did we freeze? I think we froze. Hang on, we'll bring him back. Remember, the world was having an affair on you, and you just found out while we waited for Robert to come back. That's what I've been saying. That's what I saw. It's what Spirit showed me, and I did an Instagram post on it if you saw it. But and I'm going to be talking about it Thursday more in my Miraculous Academy, because it's really true. It's people have to decide when you wake up like this. We got to bring you back. Oh, there you go. You disappeared again. So now,
sorry about that. So when we talk about lower back problems was the biggest thing I saw, and I can't say I've ever seen a lower back problem without an intestinal issue. I've never seen it.
I agree.
And people don't get that. They're like, oh, my lower back's great. It's always been great. And I'm like, yeah, but how's your digestion been? You know, and then they're like, oh, I've had years of digestive issues and constipation. I'm like, well, it's you haven't addressed that. But one of the things I see is I try to be very patient with I try to be very understanding with my patients and my clientele.
You are very understanding. You don't try. You are. No, you're very above most people. So.
Thank you. And I think it comes from having this holistic view. As you start to understand, and this is going to be an odd statement, I very seldomly see dysfunction. I see aberrant function. And I'm going to say that carefully, because I get people who come in and they're like, oh, my lower back's out and my digestion's off, and I know what you're going to tell me, I shouldn't eat this. I'm like, whoa, take a step back. Why don't we ask, why do you feel you need to comfort yourself? Why are you eating the junk food? So that we can understand what state wasn't being appeased, so you can understand what your body's trying to tell you, which is probably the exact same thing.
Yeah.
And I saw a lot of people eating junk food and alcohol and going to recreational drugs and all sorts of things. And I'm like, how could you not?
Yeah.
You're in a situation of terror and fear.
Right there, terror. I think terror, you probably see more terror in the body than actual just trauma or fear coming up right now.
I would say in the last 2 years, I think there was a lot of lead up to it. Just terror left, right, and center. And the problem is that most people don't even know what terror is.
Yeah.
Let alone to say, very few people understand the distinction between trepidation and fear, let alone to say trepidation, fear, anxiety, terror, which is the escalation.
Yeah.
And most people think they're in fear. And I'm like, no, you were in fear 10 years ago.
Yeah.
The last 8 years, you've been in absolute terror. Yeah. And let alone now people, you're just right out of the ballpark now. This is an unprecedented level of change with very little comfort. And so,
because they have no, it's very difficult to sort of say, okay, where will it go in 6 years? Like, people like to know, like you said, that comfort. That's no wonder they're leading to these things that are making them feel comfortable, even though it's just locking them more behind a door. And it's just that awareness, because they can't say, oh, okay, in 6 months or a year, we're going to be back with our friends, or we're going to be, traveling like normal again, or then there's what's restrictions. Like, there's so many things unfolding, and people like to know, notice that they want to know something before they move.
I don't believe we're in the comfortable with being in the void of uncertainty.
Yeah.
And you're right. And so what do we do when we're in the void of uncertainty? We try to cling on to something. It's like that guy who doesn't know how to, or that person who doesn't know how to swim well, and you throw them in the deep end. The first thing they do is try to get to the side to hold on to the edge of the pool or the rail. And it's the same thing. We just try to hang on. And what's really quite fascinating, when you start eating bad and your intestines get inflamed, one of the big ones that I was just left, right, and center was seeing was the large intestine. And that commonly in the alternative world, we see that as the organ of holding on.
Yeah.
It's the organ of power and control. It's the organ of fixing our reality, of holding it still. And across the board, I can't tell you. And I had to really have these gentle conversations with my patients to empower them to say, we might deal with an unprecedented level of change, and you might have to adjust to a new normal, but it's nothing you've never known. I mean, that's all of childhood. Childhood is just one, right up until you're 20, is just a continuous evolution of change. Yeah. You just forgot about it because adulthood is about being fixed. And so once you empower them, they get it. And then you say, and this I'm always careful with. I always tell people you should eat clean, but you also have to be emotionally prepared. Yeah. Because the moment you start eating clean, you start to allow the body to experience its state, and you start to release what you're holding. And that's scary. If you don't give somebody, it's kind of like saying, hey kid, look under the bed. I want you to take a look at that boogeyman. That's great, but not giving them something. That's why kids you give your kids like that plastic sword or that blanket. You know that there's no boogeyman. You know the sword's not going to work, but it helps them. Yeah. And so to tell somebody to do the things that are going to be healthy for you without saying, okay, well, here's how we deal with the emotions. And I think that's why my practice, I'm very careful with understanding that, freeing up that lower back is going to allow you to see that part of you that you don't want to see. And that's not fair. And so I always have to be a little bit more compassionate. And if somebody I have has a low back problem and takes 2 treatments to help them get to a state of better health, that's great. But I have somebody that might take 20. Yeah. I'm like, well, there's probably a missing component that you have to learn emotionally or energetically.
That's so true though, what you're saying, because I see some people, they'll be working through the same emotional, energetic release. Again, one time, like they're done, they get it, that emotion's gone, now they've moved on to something else. And someone else can stay in the same thing for year after year. And I'm like, because again, there's something you haven't integrated. There's something you still want to put in. And I love that we see that the same way, because it is, and it's life. Like things are always going to come up and down, up and down. I know we all go through periods where they're fabulous. Like I was telling my community the other day, last week, not so fabulous, like, okay, not so fabulous. So it was like, and then it's like, okay, so I shouldn't say the whole week, just a couple of days. But, again, we always have to look at that and understand your body is always talking to you. Your body always has information for you. And that's the key.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. No. You get me so excited when you start talking about this. Like, oh my God. I tell people, life is like a curriculum. It's an education, but it's not as linear as our education system. Is that you might take calculus first, and then you might learn the alphabet later. And you might not get numbers before you're supposed to learn calculus. And so you kind of fudge it until you get to the point when you can learn numbers, which sounds crazy, but how are we supposed to learn how to love when your parents don't teach you self-love? Yeah. How are you supposed to care for somebody or allow somebody to be vulnerable to you, or you to be vulnerable to somebody when you don't know what that means, when nobody taught you security? Yeah. And so we have these different lessons that we have to learn. And part of it is really interesting because you have somebody who takes a long time to learn something because they didn't have the peace. And I think the people that move the quickest have the peace. They just didn't realize it could be integrated here. And other people they just don't have the peace. Yeah. And you just have to be really patient and kind of nudge them in the direction of what that skill is. And I just think it's really quite fascinating. And you're very humbled. I'll say this, when you start to realize what human beings were supposed to learn, it's very humbling. Yeah. And I got to tell you, my practice, when I started to work on my own emotional health, and one of the things I did was I sat down and said, I do not know the basics of emotions. I couldn't clearly define what fear was as opposed to terror. or I couldn't tell you what guilt was as opposed to anger. I didn't have this map. And so when I did that and I laid it out, I'm like, oh, well, that's what that is. Oh, my own health escalated exponentially. The health of those around me started to escalate because I had this language now that I could speak to myself and to my people around me about what I was experiencing and what they're experiencing. And physically, oh my gosh, night and day difference.
Night and day. And it's really, this is one of the things I even know that we've been in our community working to create with the non-denominational ministry is working with children to understand and bring that out. Exactly what you said. None of us are taught to connect to our body as children. What is our body telling us? What are emotions? Like there must be a million definitions of what love is, and most of them are screwed up, right? And you said, what is guilt? What is fear? And it's such, these are so important for all of us as humanity to come together and move. Yet they're taken out of the curriculum because it's like this society was built for so long that they didn't want people to have that, because then we become even more empowered, right? You make better decisions, healthier. You don't need, like you and I, we don't take any pharmaceuticals, and like, I'm not knocking that. I'm saying sometimes there's place for that, but when you get empowered, you find that. And that's why for me, my choice for my body is to work with someone like you and work with you, because I know that, okay, when I leave and we have our chat, my body tells me, and I go and I work on that energy and it starts to shift, and then it just moves out. And then I don't need to sit there and say, oh, well, I'm going to be on all this medicine. And that's what I love about what you do. You're empowering people. You're empowering.
And I think, it is a bit, it's almost like a lost art. We're so inundated by our system, and I'm going to say that very vaguely, to follow, to do as you're told, to listen to.
I talk about that all the time. Stop being following the system. The institutions, I know. Sometimes I get in trouble, but I'm like, guys, this is like the secret. Like I said, osteopath's like a secret. Like what I do is like, it's still like this secret because we're moving to empower, not being dictated to, not being told.
I find the therapies that are most empowering are the ones that are the quietest.
Yeah.
And I believe that's there for a reason, because you have to search it out, because empowerment's that thing you have to claim. And if it's given to you too easy, I think not that that's not true. I think you can get it easy. No, I take that back. It's yours to claim. It's yours to claim, but I think that finding it is also fun. I think there's a fun in finding your empowerment. So I do appreciate the whole environment of disempowerment being created, because it's fascinating when you do reclaim it. And to speak to negative states, I'll bring this back to what we were talking about, the body and the emotions, and about the curriculum that we're supposed to learn. And I tell people, adverse situations are beautiful because they're constantly telling you the lesson you didn't learn. That when you were disempowered, when you're deeply grieving, when you're jealous, when you're angry, when you're bitter, these are all emotions to tell you, hey, let's point you in the direction of the curriculum that the part you were missing. And when you get this, no negative state, no positive state holds any power that's negative. It's all positive. And so I tell people, and that's why I really try to avoid the term disease with my patients, because I really try hard to not say you're broken, you're diseased. I may say this is out of balance. This is something to be paid attention to, but we have to be very careful how we phrase it, because that's where empowerment comes from. Empowerment comes from adversity and conflict. And so you can't see the disease state as something you want to get rid of, as something to objectify. You always have to say is, okay, you're something pointing me in the direction. I don't get angry at, well, I hope I don't get angry at stop signs or red lights. I'm human. There's the odd curse.
We're all human. We have our moments.
But you don't get angry at the stop sign or the speed limit. You understand your interaction with it. And so when I have somebody who's got asthma, or let's say asthma, is that, I don't say you're not asthma, you are not an asthmatic. You don't need to associate that way. What you do need is to understand what that asthma is teaching you, what that asthma is trying to bring to your presence, and why you're doing what you are with it.
Yeah, it's funny you say that as a little person born and lived on a machine with asthma, right? And realizing all the emotional trauma that went with it, and how my lungs, I just couldn't breathe life in anymore. And I'm like you, and power in words. And a lot of times when someone says I have this disease, I'm like, just remember it's dis-ease of the body. The body is just that word, right? Like it's just, there's just a dis-ease in the body, and pull it apart. And because I find with people's words a lot of times, and you probably find this when you're working on people, like they say, I have this. And the more they're saying I have this, it's like the body starts to anchor it, and more, okay, you have it. Okay, because it's listening, right? So I like to always remind people that when you have ease, it's the uncomfortable space that the body is saying something's uneasy, something isn't in alignment, something needs to be shifted. And that's where your awareness, I like, comes really empowered, where all of a sudden you can make that change and transition and not lock something into the body.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's what do you find some of the biggest joys when when you're working on people? Well, it must be, I don't know, what do you, I conceive, and I would have my assumption, but knowing you, but I'd like to hear people, some of the biggest joys you find with the people you get to work with.
Um, wow. It's really, that's a really hard question to answer,
Yeah.
because there's so much.
Yeah.
Like, oh my gosh. Um, Empowerment is huge.
Yeah.
To see somebody, I had a woman, older woman, and every step of her life was like us versus them. I'm
Oh,
disempowered. She never wanted to see a doctor because she thought that the doctor would prescribe her things she couldn't get off of, and the doctor would diagnose her with something,
yeah.
and the government and all these things. And I'm like, and I had to be very careful, because I'm like, I'm not going to dissuade you from the idea that that exists,
Yeah.
that there might be a doctor, but that's not the point here. Is that you have to empower yourself, and over time, and it's taken years, but now two different people. She's got a doctor. She sees the doctor. She has peaceful and serene, contentious discussions with her doctor. Like, I choose not to do that, but she's not frightened. She's not intimidated. She's very open to her options. And when I see that, she's just a different person, and she's so empowered. And it's just wonderful to see. And I see that a lot, because
Yeah.
people are like, my life is just different.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's probably the best part I hear. It's just when people say, yeah,
They're functioning, right? They become functioning, sovereign beings that can now not be, what I hear out of that, which I love and you see, is she's not afraid now to speak and to be who she is. Yeah.
I think one of the things that I really like to see is that there's aberrance on both sides,
Yeah.
and that the doctor who's prescribing you medication, and the doctor, I don't mean to pick on doctors, let's say healthcare provider,
Yeah.
because I mean that happens across all of healthcare. Let's say that healthcare provider makes you feel guilty, or who suppresses you or tells you what to do. I'm like, they're hurting too.
Yes.
And the more empowered you get, the more in your state you start to bring them back into a center with you.
Yes.
And I see this idea of, hey, whoa, I know you want to push your agenda, but that comes from a space in your life that's unresolved. It's not me.
That's what
And
I really love about you, and I'm really happy you said that, because I see that a lot across the board. I hear it from people I work with, even in the community, where they're like, well, they say I have to do this and this. I'm always like, take what resonates and sort of throw the rest away, and maybe you'll come back to it later, right? Because again, you want them, and I love that you do that, because there is a lot of guilt and shame, like if you don't do it this way, or you don't do it that way, or and I don't think there's a place to have the guilt and shame. We're just, again, we're just trying, like you said, to get through where is the next space and the next learning, because that can be quite damaging, and that can create trauma, I think, in the body. Because I know, like, I've seen two different people, and I always use this example. I'd love to hear your perception on this. Is I'll say, well, you could say to someone, don't eat the cookie when they're little, and the little kid goes, okay, whatever. But then you say that same thing to another really sensitive person, and now they're totally traumatized.
got it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's a really interesting point, that there are no absolutes. And I always tell my patients this: there's no absolutes. that, maybe giving chocolate to one person is going to be like the worst thing on the planet, but to this person, it might not be. Actually, I'll use myself as a prime example, and then I'll segue into the emotional body. People are always like, I never drink Coke. And I'm like, that's funny. I drink Coke. I don't do it often, but once in a while, because Coke, when we used to have family get-togethers, and this is like way back 70s, you had Coke at Christmas and Easter. And to me, Coke is a beautiful thing. It reminds me of family and togetherness. And so when I'm feeling really down, once in a while I'll have a Coke. It's not my emotional crutch, but I'll have it because it reminds me, oh yeah, there's beautiful things in the world that remind me of my family.
Yeah.
And so I use it once in a while, and I would never make somebody feel guilty. Now, if they're drinking it every day, then my job is to ask them, hey, is there a reason for that? And this idea of absolutes, and I really like that about you, Tracy. Oh my God. I always hear this very beautiful, encompassing ambivalence, which is this idea of, well, does it work for you? Mm-hmm. Well, what is it doing for you? And I'm like, wow, those are beautiful terms, because you're bringing it back into their court and asking them, what is it that feeds you? What is it that diminishes you? And bringing awareness. Yeah. And I think as a practitioner, as a human being, I think we should embrace that more. I think I completely tangent off of what you said.
You didn't. No, you didn't. And it's perfect because it's absolutely, you didn't. It's perfect because it's true. And like you were saying, Coke, well, I have that with hickory sticks. I don't know if you know. Most people don't know what hickory sticks are. But when people understand what happened in my family, my dad, when we would see him, would take us to the movies and we get a bag of hickory sticks.
Yep.
So to me, every once in a while, that's my go. Every once in a while, I'll go into it too. That's it. And I don't eat them all the time. I, sometimes buy them in bulk, but I can have a bag every couple of months. I'm not eating a bag every night or whatever. But like you said, it's just a nice little memory of something that is fun. And I think in the 70s, we were like that. We didn't have much like they did now. So these little things were treats. They were
Absolutely.
treats. That's what they were. And Charlie's getting busy. You're going to hear him back there. So for people that, I know we're already getting to the top of the hour. It always goes so fast. For people that are curious and they're looking into an osteopath and they want to know what it can do for them, what advice would you give for the listeners before we have to go of what they should look for? Because they're not in the GTA. If you're in the GTA, well, you guys we'll have all the information below and Robert will tell us where you can find him. But if they're not, what are the things they should look for and that they can expect?
So one of the common questions or statements I get from a lot of people, I didn't know if you could treat this. I didn't know if you could address this. And I tell everybody that we're helping you help yourself. There theoretically isn't anything that's taken off the table because we can work so gently and because we can work on the other extreme end, which is more deeply. It's up to you what you're allowing, but the idea is to help you help yourself. I forget the summit. I think it was 3 years ago. There was a cancer summit. And one of the primary suggestions for alternative approaches was osteopathy. And it didn't matter what cancer you had because we're helping you help yourself. We're helping the immune system. We're helping the nervous system. So it doesn't matter if you have restless leg syndrome or ulcers or asthma or headaches, or you wet the bed, or you get anxious, or you have social differences, like whatever it is, we can probably assist. And again, that's the big thing I always tell my patients is you always just got to be careful with understanding what you're trying to approach. Because we're not approaching the disease, we're approaching you. And a good osteopath can always assist you in any situation. Now, saying that, what you're looking for, if I was looking for an osteopath, I always choose intuitively. I always trust your gut. And if your gut tells you something's not right here, you should respect that. I almost always go by referral. When I see a practitioner, I always ask the person who's referring, what did you go for? What was your experience? I like to go by referrals, or at least find somebody who might have seen that therapist. And so they can kind of give you an understanding, both good and bad.
Yeah.
So that's always one. If I was to say, it's always good to check, and this is good for any therapy, always good to check the association to make sure they're in good standing, to make sure they're licensed or insured, or that they're, and you have to have both. You have to have a license and be insured if you're part of an association. My association, I'm listed on the website. So just the very fact I'm there tells you that I've got both those. So if you look for an osteopath, they should be associated with their association. There's two major ones right now. The OOA, Ontario Osteopathic Association, the Ontario Association of Osteopaths, very similar. So it's always good to check that. And I say that for anything, whether you're seeing a chiropractor or physiotherapist, it's always good to check to see if they're in good standing. Other than that, it's always good to understand that you might have questions and prepare them for whoever you're seeing. I always tell my patients, you know, if you have concerns, say it up front. If you don't like your neck touched, if you had a history of abuse and you're very sensitive to somebody's distance to you, if you don't like a tone of voice, all things are valid. I tell my patients, all things are valid. I don't care how superficial it sounds that you just did your hair and you're going to a dinner party after the session. If that's your concern, that's your concern. I know it sounds funny.
I love it when you're always working up in the head. I don't care. I'll walk out of there with my hair up to here like an afro. I don't mind. I'm like, go for it. It's like, you just feel so good.
I know 99% of my patients couldn't care less, but you know, every once in a while, and I hate to say this because it's mostly women, because they attend to their personal care better.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Two different things. Guys smell all the time. When I get a woman that's like, oh, I smell. I'm like, you smell like roses. I had a farmer two hours ago that came in and smelled like manure. Like, I'm like, what the hell?
You're a farmer. So I love that smell. My grandpa was a farmer, so I actually like that smell. I know it sounds crazy, but it reminds me of him, and he was like my favorite male in my whole life. So
I totally get that. And I would never kick somebody out for the way they smell, because I'm like, you know what? That says something. There's somebody out there that's going to smell like something. But anyways, one of the things I do respect is that, and I always try to encourage my patients to understand this, that's your space.
Yeah.
That's your time. And you should feel free to express what you want, as long as it's done safely. You don't assault your therapist or anybody in the immediate area. You can take the time to cry or take a drink of water or to express yourself. And that's your space. And you should be very careful to understand that that therapist is willing to reciprocate that for you. That if I get a therapist who shuts me down before I can express myself, that's not really, that's an ideology you might want to understand better. And I'm not going to say right or wrong. You might want to understand it and whether it fits your needs. And my patients, they'll come in and they'll be like, yeah, I had a crappy day. And they'll start talking about it. And they'll be like, you know, I'm taking up all the time talking. I'll sit there and I'll say, yeah, but I'm willing to hear it, but let me work while you talk.
Yeah.
So you can discuss whatever you want. And we can stop at any point so you can really feel what you're going through, because that's all it's about. It's about understanding how you take your environment and how you internalize it.
And that's what I love so much about with you, because you do that. And I know we have great conversations, and then I'll stop and go, okay, what's moving? I know we have to go. So Olivia's like, top of the hour. So where can people find you in the GTA? Where's the best way for them to look you up?
Right now, I only practice in Oakville. I practice in a small practice near Lakeshore and Trafalgar, downtown Oakville. I have a website, practiceinprinciples.com. You're welcome to go there. You can book online. I'm a very quiet person. My website is probably the most advertising I'll do. Other than that, but sorry, Tracy, what was that?
We're going to have all the details below. I can't thank you enough. I know you're more quiet, and it was brave for you to come. And I'm so grateful that you were able to come and share with the community and the listeners and help wherever they are, what country they're in, because we're in every country, I think, so they can go. So thank you so much for joining me and helping other people understand. I really appreciate your time and what you do. It means a lot.
That goes both ways. I'm so honored to be a part of your journey. Oh my gosh. Thank you. I know we're cutting time, so I won't keep that, because I can probably just spend the next hour thanking you.
It goes both ways. So everybody, I want to thank you for tuning in this week live. You can catch us where you love your favorite podcasts on any outlet, 90 outlet. It'll also be on my YouTube channel. Usually by the end of the week, we upload it there on Transformation Talk Radio's YouTube channel. So you can listen, Facebook, wherever you guys like to be. So next week, we have our friendship hour with some people from our Miraculous Academy, new people coming back, sharing their experiences, their shifts, and their empowerment. So have an incredible week, everyone. Don't forget, April 27th, we will be doing our live call-in shows again. April 22nd is our summit with Jennifer Watson and Lucas Mack, who you've seen here as well. And we're going to help you get to more of the truth as we shift through the rest of this year. So have a great week, everyone. And we'll see you next week, same time, same place. Thank you for listening to the Tracy L Clark Show with me, Tracy L, where I teach you how to connect to the God consciousness so you can unlock your superpowers and connect at light speed and live your extraordinary life. Tune in every Tuesday at 8 a.m. Pacific on Transformation Talk Radio, where together we will unlock the secrets of your body and your life. As a founder of the Body Regeneration Academy, I, Tracy L, will provide you with the insight and simple tools you can apply right now in your life to move you forward and leave the past in the dust. To join the Body Regeneration TLC Online Academy, make sure you check me out at tracylclark.com.